it, and I was like, wait. Oh, yeah. Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. For those online, hello, my name is Eva Kelly. I'm the planning manager and the acting development services director for the city of Hollister. Also with the city helping on this housing element project, we have to Melisaka over here in the corner. And then our consulting team here joining us tonight is Bryant DeLatour and Dave Barquist. So thank you again for everyone spending your Wednesday evening with us to talk about housing, but we really appreciate your attendance. We are recording here on Zoom, so the recording will be available for everyone out there as well. And we have some snacks for those in the audience here. And with that, I will turn this over to Bryant and Dave, and I'll pull up our PowerPoint on the screen. Thank you.
Let's see if we get that on the screen here. Welcome to everybody and those folks that are joining us online. We appreciate your time. We have a unique thing tonight. If you need translation, we'll have a AI assisted process that you can go through. Brian will talk that. So I have to say it because it's translation for those who want to speak Spanish. So he'll say it in Spanish in a moment here. So let's pull it up.
Should be good. Try it now.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Brian de la Torre. Si necesitan traducción en español o otros lenguajes, tenemos el código aquí en la pantalla. Si quieren escanear el código, pueden ir en el sitio web de Wordly y ponen su idioma y hagan clic al asistir, y ahí pueden oír la presentación en español o cualquier idioma. Gracias.
All right, let's get started here. So we have an agenda, and the idea here this evening is to introduce you to the process about the housing element. There's a large document, a policy document that's in draft that's available for the public. We'll walk you through that. Explain some of the pieces to the puzzle here with the housing element. And at the very end, we'll have an opportunity for you as participants to provide your input. We see some information on the wall here. We'll give you all those details. And the idea this evening is to really have you speak to us and not so much us telling you something. But the first part of it, we want to give you some good information, help you understand a little better. And then we can clarify any of the questions and any other items you want to discuss at the end of the presentation, if that's okay. So for the agenda, we'll review the housing element. It's a required element of the general plan. The city is updating that because it's required by state law. It's a pretty lengthy document, as you may know. And we want to give you a little story on what that's all about. We talked about the regional housing needs allocation or regional housing needs assessment process and what that's all about, what it means, what the implications are to the community, and what the responsibilities are at the local level for the housing. And then talk about the efforts and the things that we talked to the community about, the drafts and all the whole process to date, what got us to this point here this evening. And then we'll talk about the public review draft, which is a document that's available. If you haven't read it, we'll show you where to find it, how to comment. Your comments are welcome this evening and or after the fact this evening, so it's great. One of the main things on the process is site selection or identifying areas of opportunity.
Want to try this one and see if it cuts out some of that frequency?
That's over there. Sounds good. It's not me. We talk about site selection, which is really about the identification of opportunity sites to accommodate our housing needs over the next 8 or so years. And so that's an important part of the housing element. We'll walk you through that. Then we'll have a time to have your discussion. You can identify some of the issues that you may have, opportunities that you see that we may have missed or you'd like us to know. And then one thing about priorities is what's most important to you? What do you think the city should focus on, and those ideas? And so we're open to that. We want to hear your ideas. And then we'll give you some next steps. So from now until it comes to the city council for adoption, what are the steps we have to go through? Each one of those steps you can be involved in the process. So we'll let you know how you can do that. So we want your input this evening. We'll give you a little storytelling here in the beginning, but we really want to hear from you. So the show will be yours in a bit. So just be patient, grab some cookies and enjoy the movie for a moment. We'll get back to you. So just to have a productive workshop, if you save those questions till the end, that will help us get through it, and we can have some focused discussion with you, answer any of those questions or give you any direction that you need. We really want your ability to provide input to us, so we really encourage you to give us some good insight and your ideas, and don't be shy. We really appreciate that in the process. And so with that, know that the recording of this presentation will be available in the future. So if you want to come back and visit it, or you have friends who can attend this evening, you can let them know the link, and it'll be on the website for the city. So it's something that will live for until we have that draft adopted by the council. So it's always going to be available to the community. So with that, let's talk about the overview of the housing element, and I'm going to introduce Brian to kind of walk you through the housing element and all the other pieces to the puzzle. So he will.
Good evening, my name is Brian Vittori, with Kinley Horton Associates, here with Dave, assisting the city with the housing element effort. So we had workshop number one. We'll go into a little overview in a bit, what was discussed, some of the output from that, different community events that we had. But first, we just want to give an overview of the housing element. For people who have joined us before, this will be repetitive, but we'll fly through it. Hopefully, we don't miss anything. If there's any point where we're going too fast, please feel free to I'll stop. But again, it's just a question. We ask that you give to me. So first, we start with the housing element. So the housing element, it's part of the housing. The general plan. So the housing element is just one element in the general plan. It's updated every 8 years, and it's the only housing element. It's the only general plan element that needs to be updated regularly. So it's updated every 8 years. The reason we do that is because the market changes, housing conditions change, obviously the economy changes. So we need to update based on current projections of housing moving forward. Also, we do this to look back at our progress that we made in the last 8 years to see what we can improve on. The housing element identifies housing sites, strategies, programs to address the needs in the city. So through this, we have a housing program plan, sites, different strategies to accommodate the housing that's projected for the city, and also for the region as a whole. So this document, it's reviewed by the state. The department that reviews it at the state is HCD, so the Housing and Community Development Department, and they will ultimately submit to them. They'll provide responses to us if the housing element is not in statutory compliance. They'll provide comments to address any outstanding outstanding items that were addressed. So the reason their housing amounts are updated, kind of skipped ahead a second ago, but housing growth changes, projection growth changes. So just to keep up to date and to meet the needs of our community, we need to update it. And also, it's a way for residents, stakeholders, any interested party to be involved in this process. So tonight, again, thank you for joining us in person and online. We need your input to draft this plan since it will affect housing policy moving forward. So certified housing element, what that means is it's been vetted by the state, it's been approved. It means all state law, housing state law, and it's been essentially cleared by the state. And what certification allows the city to have is the ability to go after grants, go after funding that allows the city to attract additional housing allows the city to have the access to funds to implement some of the programs in the housing. So the housing element is kind of we took a layered approach. It's every section really builds on top of each other. They're all interrelated, but one of the key aspects in it that we start off with is a housing profile. So it's a snapshot of the city, our demographics, our housing types currently, housing age. We go over a lot of data in that section. It's very data heavy. Then we go into any possible constraints that we can find in the city, and this is constraints to development of housing. So both the total amount of housing, the cost of housing, the processes to develop housing. So this is going to governmental constraints. So do we here in the city of Hollister have policies that are acting as a barrier to development? And then we go into non-governmental constraints. So this is market forces, cost of land, cost of materials, cost of labor. Then we go into environmental constraints. So here in the city, we have a lot of earthquake, one of the biggest environmental constraints is fault zones. We also have flood zones, high fire severity zones. So we're very limited. In the city itself, it's not that big of an issue, but once we look in the wider region, we run into a lot of those issues. But in the city specifically, we'll go into those constraints. A big part of the housing as well is the affirmatively furthering fair housing section. So this is where we look at fair housing conditions in the city to identify any fair housing issues can be identified. And if they can be identified, we address those through our housing, which we'll get into in a second. Not the most important part, but one of the most important parts of the housing element is identifying sites where housing can feasibly be developed to accommodate our RHNA. We'll go into RHNA in a second, but essentially RHNA is the total land units that the city is required to accommodate. Again, this plan is not a plan to develop any housing. No projects are going to be approved or considered as part of this document, but we are trying to accommodate for this housing so that they can feasibly be developed. As part of the program, as part of the housing element, we analyze our past performance in the last cycle to identify issues, to identify our progress, and evaluate if our programs are effective. So now we go to RHNA. So RHNA is Regional Housing Need Allocation. This is the total amount of units that have been allocated to City of Hollister. So for the City of Hollister, we have a total of 4,163 in the sixth cycle. So when we talk about the sixth cycle, we're talking about the 8-year period between 2023 and 2031. So during this time frame, we're trying to accommodate the 4,163 units. This is a pretty significant increase from the last cycle, which we'll see in a second. But these 4,163 units are broken down by income category. So here on the screen, you'll see there's 5 income categories that we break it down into. And we'll see a bulk of the units are above moderate, but 3 of the categories extremely low, very low, and low income. Kind of as a group, that's all what we consider lower income housing. That's about a quarter of the total units that we accommodate for. Typically, that's the most difficult to accommodate for, just because this may require subsidies, this may require additional deviations from typical standards. So in this plan, we plan to address that. We'll see that the income categories align with the income ranges that are shown on the screen. So in 2023, the area minimum income for a family of 4 in the county of San Benito was approximately 140,000. So you'll see across the board kind of how that breaks down. You'll see that for just the mid-range, which is low income, the range for a family of 4 would be 55,000 to about 80,000. Just as and again, about 40% of all households in the city fall into that extremely low to low income category. So from 0 to 80% of the total. And here we'll see the change from the 5th to the 6th cycle. Like we mentioned, there's been over 200% increase from the fifth cycle. So in the fifth cycle, the arena, the amount of units we were trying to accommodate for was 1,316. We see that that's almost tripled. So there's a lot more that we need to accommodate. So back in May of last year, we had Community Workshop 1. So Community Workshop 1 was just really to introduce the housing element, what the housing element is, what the city is required to do. We discussed some items of what the housing element would do. And at this point, we didn't really have any concrete policies or sites or anything like that. It was really just to introduce the housing element and get some input so that when the housing element is in the works, that we can use that feedback to drop it. And in that workshop, we got a lot of feedback. One of the biggest things was the lack of affordable housing options, and just the lack of affordable housing in general, but also just housing options across all income categories, just a lack of housing types. So we see a predominance of single family homes, and the participants at that workshop, they expressed they would like to see more housing options and more affordable housing through it. And then we also went into specific areas within the community that participants believe should be identified as housing sites. We didn't go into specific parcels, but it was more generalized areas. So they identified the downtown area along Buena Vista Road and along Santa Ana as key housing opportunities. Those are kind of three that had multiple responses or were other responses. But also was that aligned with the identification of downtown as an area of interest is an interest in infill development. So there are lots that may be vacant or underutilized that participants identified as areas that could be redeveloped. We also had a community survey after the workshop, and there was a series of questions that were asked in there. Some of them aligned with questions that were asked that were discussed in the workshop. Some of them new. We just identified. We asked participants to identify housing opportunities, housing issues, areas that should be considered, policies that should be considered. And in that online survey, we received 57 responses, and then in-person staff received 64 responses at the downtown farmers market. That was in the and from these community surveys, again, we got two similar comments to two similar key points that we got from the workshop, and it's the need for additional affordable housing, a need for senior housing, and a need for larger household types. So for households with 5 or more members. So in December of last year, we also had our first study session with City Council and Planning Commission. And during that session, we had some feedback from commissioners and City Council members on some issues to consider. And some of that feedback was made in the document. So, and then 2 weeks ago, we had our second study session with the same joint body. And again, we got some feedback that will be that hasn't been implemented yet, but once the public review period is ending, those will be considered and revised and the document will be revised. So now we go to the public review draft. When we talk about the public review draft, we talk about the document that still hasn't been submitted to the state, but it's a draft that is complete. It's currently available for the public to see and available for the public to provide comments. So about 2 months ago, January 26th, the city published this document. It's available on the city's website, and it's available for public comment. So we can receive public comment both verbally, like here now in person, for people that are online. You can also provide feedback on the city's website. There's a link on there that we'll go into in a second. But there's a statutory period that we must have this draft posted for public review, and that's 30 days. So we'll see that tomorrow that 30-day period has concludes. And not that after those 30 days, we won't be taking public comment. We'll be taking public comment throughout this whole process. So until the document is certified, we'll be taking public comment, but this is just the mandatory 30 days. And we ask that people provide feedback throughout. Again, this is the link where you can access the document on the city's website. On there, you'll see every section, and there'll be a link to provide feedback. I'm gonna really go through this just because I explained it a little bit ago. So one of the appendices, we go through the housing needs assessment. So this is just a snapshot of our demographics and our housing within the city. We analyze the amount of households, the amount of household units, age of households, a lot of data. That section is very data heavy. Then we identify constraints of both non-governmental, governmental infrastructure constraints, and environmental constraints. And once we identify those, we address those constraints through programs. We identify what resources are available, both for residents and applicants who wish to develop housing. And then we go into our policy plan. So these are the actionable items that the city will take to address some of these issues and also to further fair housing and to further the development of housing. Yeah. So there's 5 overarching goals of the housing element. They're here on the screen. We won't go through all of them, but these 5 goals are kind of all of our programs fall into one of these 5 goals. Some may not fit exactly, but it have the same general intent, and they'll all fall into these 5. This is one of the housing policies that are it's actually in the document. So this is an ADU policy. I won't go through all of it, but you'll see that we set up what ADUs are, and then we have the most important part is the action. So what the city will do to address ADUs. So ADUs will be ADU policy or standards in the city, and specifically in the zoning code will be amended and updated to comply with state laws. So this is just a pretty minor comment, but the program itself is meant to encourage ADU development, streamline ADU development, and then specifically have authority. So now we go on to the candidate sites analysis. So this is the sites that we've identified to accommodate that. So we saw earlier 4,613 units that we must accommodate, and we accommodate that through a variety of actions that we'll see now in a bit. But one of the guiding principles when we identify sites is we have the appropriate zoning to develop housing. We have the appropriate development standards, and we have sufficient land to develop the house. Additionally, we want to identify sites in areas that are going to improve existing areas and not exacerbate if there's any specific conditions in that. This last point, this is so when we identify housing, we can assume the state allows us to assume that here in Hollister, if the development is 20 dwelling units, an acre or more, we can count those units towards lower income. If they actually develop as lower income, that's not the case all the time, but for the sakes of our document, we can take that assumption. So here on the screen, you'll see there's a lot of numbers, but throughout the table, you'll see areas of the city or specific strategies that we took to accommodate housing. So you'll see under the existing capacity column, you'll see all of those are ways that we were able to take credit for specific units based on our current existing zoning, projects that are in the pipeline. So these are projects that were either already approved, are in review, and are anticipated to be approved and developed during our 6 cycles, as well as ADU projections. So this is based off our ADU development estimates and averaging that out and then advertising that over the 6 cycle. And then a big one is our rezone strategies. So because our existing zoning the densities didn't allow us to accommodate enough units sorry, our zoning didn't allow us to accommodate the total amount of units that we were required to accommodate for. We went strategic areas to accommodate the housing, and we did that through rezones. So we'll see in a bit that these densities were increased in the strategic areas of the city, and then with that, we were able to get a buffer of our development. We were required to zone for 563. Sorry, we were required to accommodate 4,163 units, and we were able to accommodate more than that. And the reason for that is that development most likely will not develop the way we anticipate. So it's good to have a buffer. In case a couple sites don't develop the way we anticipate. We still have a buffer there with the additional sites. So here we'll see our first rezone is titled the North Gateway Rezone. So it's in the north of the city, towards the entrance of the city, along San Felipe, and we'll see that the existing zoning currently, this part, it's one parcel. This parcel currently doesn't allow housing, and through the rezone, it will allow 65 units per acre. So through here, we can yield 636 units on this parcel. It's a pretty large parcel. Then we have a rezone strategy titled the High Density Residential Rezone. So through here, we're just increasing density in a lot of specific parcels in the city from 35 to 65. And then we have the mixed use zone as well, where we're going from 41 units to 65. And lastly, we have the downtown mixed use rezone. So this is specific parcels within the downtown use area, going from 45 units per acre to 125 units. All right, so I flew through there. Now I want to go into the part where we get your feedback. If there's any questions, this is the time where we'll take questions, and then we'll go into a small exercise to get some feedback. For those that are online, if you can raise your hand, right? There's a hand raise function. You can raise your hand, and we'll put you in, and you can ask your question or provide feedback. So feel free to engage in this exercise.
Oh, yes, right, go ahead.
All right. So the first question, we're going to have these post-its up here. If you want to go up and post them, if not, we can write them down, and then you can just tell us, and then we'll write them out. Great. All right.
I'll do it.
And then feel free, if you have any other questions or feedback that you'd like us to know and to consider, don't feel like we're stuck on these 3 questions. This is just to get the conversation started. If there's any additional questions, additional information you'd like us to know, feel free to show up. But the first one is we would like your help with identifying any challenges or unique characteristics of housing in Hollister that we think we should consider in the housing.
And when you're writing, put one idea for a post-it note, and then we can post it up here. And the idea is for the folks that are writing this down, come up here and stick it up on the wall, and then we can talk about each one of those as we put up to this.
All right, I'm gonna move the camera kind of this way.
And if you don't feel like doing it, just wait for it.
Yes, and anyone online, feel free to raise your hand. I can mute and unmute you. And we're happy to take your answers as well for these questions.
And then I know for people online, you can't see what's on the board, but in a second I'll pass the mic over to Dave and we'll go over what next week.
Just make it mean you're still ready. That's what I'm doing. I may read some of the challenges that we've identified. There's a few here. This is good benefit of the folks who are listening in, and the folks that are online. If you want to go in and raise your hand, you can also add to that. And I believe there may be a chat function in there as well.
I think our chat is turned off.
Okay, the chat is turned off, so I'm right. Let's see, we have a few here, and I'll apologize if I can't read your handwriting. I'll come to you and you can say it yourself. But some of the challenges are the lack of adequate support programs. So that's programs in support of, say, affordable housing, et cetera. What I'm assuming is the amount and availability of those programs. This is a question, but a challenge in it. How do you increase density without increasing additional cost? So if you want to increase the density in a product, how do you do that without increasing the actual cost of developing the units? Is that correct? Lack of affordable housing. The question on that, I think, is what is affordable? It's the ability for someone to afford it, right? And so it's that 30% rule. You ever heard that? If you're paying more than 30% of your income, monthly income towards housing, it's a little burdensome. So you could be somebody who makes this much or somebody who makes this much, right? But it's still the affordability is still an issue if you can't afford it. Great. The next one is, excuse me. Is it how do you go around? How do you get 65 minutes parking? Let me use the mic to you. Question I have is, the question I have on the high density, assuming 65 inch break and an earthquake on, how do you do it? The area you want to run, which doing down here can cost way higher. Besides, I don't believe we have services to go 5 and 6 floors. I think that needs to be looked at and assessed. I'll write that down as we walk through here. But the challenge with that is from a cost standpoint, the feasibility of actually doing relative is really the challenge. Thank you. And then we have one more here. It's I think it's one of the questions is have you finalized the distribution of the affordable? Is it housing or is it units?
The affordable houses, the ratio 753 or 551. The last meeting is on.
Oh, yeah, so that sounds like it's related to our inclusionary housing ordinance. So we don't have an adopted inclusionary housing ordinance at this time, so nothing's been adopted.
Good. And then is there anything else we wanted to add to that? Just raise your hand. I can come over and give you a good. Awesome. Why don't we move into opportunity? So what is an opportunity? It's a challenge is just an opportunity in itself. So So that's what we want to do in this one. So why don't you think about, based on the questions you have here, or the challenges you have, what are the opportunities that you see in the community? It doesn't have to necessarily be related to housing per se, but programs, funding, or other things that we see are opportunities, participation by the community, et cetera. If there's any of those that you feel are important and you want to report us, take a few seconds and write them down.
I think for those on, you have a question or you want to answer this. If there's any. When you say opportunity, just what is the opportunities for both housing, opportunities for policy, for actions that the city can take to either, streamline housing development, encourage development, make it easier for development, and also for, those trying to access, housing. How can we address that? What are some opportunities? Any more questions? Any more?
We have lots of post-its.
Please share.
One of the wisdom to use is as you're still writing, I'll read some of these here, some opportunities in rental housing, right? That's the issue with housing, right? There's tenure, so rental versus owner. And not everybody can do one or the other, right? And so what is that rental opportunity, multifamily down payment assistance for rental? Is that correct?
No, down payment for homeownership.
Okay.
Sorry, I wrote all those down for you, so I had to separate them into separate sticky notes.
And then the other thing is, coordination between the city and county. That's the county has the unincorporated lands, the city has incorporated lands, but also the city has portions of land that are in the sphere of influence that will eventually go from the county to the city, so that working relationship is a good opportunity to coordinate. One of the other opportunities is a strengthening or streamlining the process. So the approval process from idea to a doorknob, if you will, is to streamline that process. Good news is there's a lot of new state law requirements that require that, especially for affordable housing. But how in the document and housing element in the overall programs and policies of the city could streamline the process. So assumably make that easier to construct as well. Assume. Did we miss anybody else? You talked about affordability, it's getting harder and harder for the development community. With inflation, with everything now, with our groceries, with our building costs and labors, it's justifiable. But yeah, it's, we adopt new policies in counties and cities such as in protection of farmland. That cost goes right to the house, right to that point, somewhere, because you have a lot of old family farms here. They've been sitting there, they've owned this property for 100 years. And they're at the point now where they're being exposed by development and said, well, they're up in age, and family members have passed away.
and they wanted to do the property, but they don't have to get rid of it. So I think we're going to run into those kind of problems when you start telling them they're gonna go out and have to find, 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 acres for their agricultural properties. It only adds to the cost of development. Because if they decide to sell, the developer said, I have to take that on front also. And his bottom line, you talk to these public companies, they're not in it for fun, they're not in it for the practice. They're in it to make money, and you can't, it's business. But it affects the landowner, it ultimately affects what we're doing here, trying to build affordability. So I think something needs to be looked at, some of these issues, maybe, there can be a waiver if you meet a certain percentage of affordability or something. But those are direct costs that discussions are going on right now, on the bottom line.
I tried to capture that there as agriculture versus housing, and you said it in your own words, and that will live forever on the.
So, in the document, we set some priorities, already, but, because this is a living document, because this document will be updated as we go through the process, we want to know what are some important priorities for you all, here in person and for, those that are online. What are some important priorities for housing? I know over here from you is the bottom line, so trying to develop affordable development, trying to develop just housing in general, and trying to get bottom line. So along those lines, just priorities in general for housing in the city of Hollister. In fact, I'll be walking around, so we'll keep running around if you have a question or if you want to put the stickies on the paper. For those on the what do you see?
Three in here, and I'll write this down, rezoning of some of the vacant land. So new opportunities of housing that weren't there before. And then upzoning, which means it's not a pure rezone, so it's a open space for residential. It's saying you have a place that has density of X. We're just increasing that density to provide additional housing opportunity. And then high-rise building or multifamily or mixed use. So there's three pieces in there, right? There's higher densities, larger building heights to accommodate more units, more density. And then multifamily, which is typically a rental product. And then mixed use, which is a combination of commercial and residential or any other thing, combination with residential as well. Which up in Northern California, the Central Valley, we're starting to see a lot of that. You have some examples of that. You miss anything?
All right, do we have any just questions in general or feedback or comments that we'd like to discuss?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tiffany Rapp. I'm an associate planner with the County of San Benito, and here's a representative of the planning department tonight. We are working on a comment letter. We're going to try to get that to you hopefully by Friday. But my comment is with regard to policy H1.1, which talks about local government leadership. It discusses working with community agencies on housing. The county would like to see an updated policy with language that reflects commitment and coordination between the city and county, especially with regard to housing in county parcels in or near the sphere of influence or county-owned parcels within the city limits. as those will, most likely eventually get annexed at some point. So that's my comment. Thank you so much.
Any comments? Anything, questions? Anyone online, comments or questions? Not seeing anything? Okay.
No,
If
yeah.
you're not seeing anything, again, this is a process that will continue. If there's feedback that you would like the city to consider, there's a couple options that we will have.
Oh, yeah. Probably it's off the property this time. Okay, should be
All right, so on the city's website, I both here, there's a copy of the document here, right?
Yes, we have a copy, a hard copy of the document available here in City Hall at 375 Fifth Street, that anyone's welcome to come in during our hours and look through that document. We also have a hard copy over in the Development Services Department down the street at 339 Fifth Street. And then it's available, of course, online on our website here. So the document's available in several places, several different forms. We encourage you to read it and give us your feedback.
Yeah, and you can access it on the city's website. There's a landing page as soon as you log onto the city's website. You'll see it. It's pretty easy to get to. There's a compiled version of the document, so 300 plus pages. And then there's individual sections. If there's just sections that you just want to look at, and respond to specific sections, you can download each one of those. And then when you're submitting comments, there's a link there to a form where you can provide comments. And we can provide any comments in there, specific questions. The city will try its best to address questions, but we're looking for, you know, feedback from the document itself, just to get you know, your engagement. You can get your idea of how you feel about this stuff. And I can also deliver.
I think it just depends on where you are in the room.
You can also deliver your comments here to the city in person, or via mail, at the address here on the screen. And when you go online, this is the form that you'll see once you click in there. You just press the document, you can see it in English and Spanish. It's the same questions, so you just provide your info in there, provide your comment and submit that. Again, that mandatory 30-day comment review period concludes tomorrow. That doesn't mean that's the end of the public review period. Public review period is essentially at all times, and all public comments will be considered, and where appropriate will be addressed. Yeah, and then Dave, for those Dave's walking around right now, passing around comment cards. So if there's any other comments that you'd like to add, feel free to add to write it down, provide to us. All right, so now we look at next steps. So where we're at right now is workshop number 2. And tomorrow, like I mentioned, the public review period concludes. Now this is the time where we'll take all public comment. We'll take feedback that we received from the planning commission and the city council, and we'll make adjustments to the document where appropriate. So once all that's done, the city must take at least 10 days after the 29th. So we can't formally submit to the state until 10 days after tomorrow. So once that's all done, that'll be submitted. So it's anticipated within the month of March to submit that, unless there's initial revisions that are substantial. Then we'll move it to right. So again, if there's any questions, we'll be here. We're scheduled until 8:30. We have some time, but if there's any questions online, here in person, we're here. If you have any questions at any time, again, on the website, you'll see contact info as well as the housing email and the phone number for the planning division. Again, there's snacks here. Please help us finish them, or we will. Thank you again for joining us, and for everyone online for joining us as well.
Yeah, I can, if I can just add quickly, is any comments that you have, if you leave here this evening and you have other ideas, the city is accepting comments all the way up until the moment that it's before the city council, so. Your comments are always welcome, there's no bad time, it's only, bad if we don't hear from them, so encourage them, so.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And thank you to those who are online. I hope to hear from you in writing or in person. And yes, thank you, everyone, for who was able to come tonight. We appreciate it.
Take home snacks.